It's time for Mic'd Up. This is the time of the show we dedicate to hearing from unique and cool people doing some unique and cool things. Conversations, not sound bites. Now, today we hear the story of Halim Flowers, an emerging black artist who, after serving 22 years in prison, is now displaying his world-known work next to Basquiat and Andy Warhol.
How you have this cocaine to Wall Street pipeline, right? When it comes to us, it's like a school to prison pipeline. What's historically relevant to our city is the death of Len Bias and how legislators use his death.
We're at the DTR Modern Art Galleries in Georgetown with Halim Flowers, who is a rising artist, a poet for some time, but your art is on display here. How did you get into this world?
My wife and I were walking to the Kennedy Center for our wedding anniversary in 2020, and we just walked past this place and was like, I never knew that this was an art gallery, because my studio was at the house on Arts Lab up the street at the time, and we just walked in, and I was like, you know, I'm an artist too, and my studio was up the street, and she did a studio visit and told the owner of the galleries, and he flew down here and met me, and you know, the rest is history. I didn't start painting until the quarantine in March 2020. So
can we just put a period on that real quick? You just started painting
March 2020.
In March of 2020,
exactly.
And now you're a renowned artist, modern artist on display. Right. That's amazing.
That's a blessing. When you're coming from rising from a bottomless pit, right? And how can you fall?
We walk back and see some of your work.
I was searching for a better way.
Each picture is a book within itself.
Never quit, never hesitate.
This is a book about cryptocurrency and financial, literacy and Wall Street and SEC. This is about children and music.
So you'd almost prefer to call these books instead of...
Yeah, they books. They books because a picture should be worth 1,000 words and maybe more.
The ones who hate it still working the same. They hit me and tell me they proud of me.
I'm a nerd. I'm a self-professed nerd. I just think that, I'm sure I grew up in a community where even though I took my pre-SATs when I was 11 and I was taking courses at Howard University when I was 11, it wasn't a community that celebrated intelligence, right? It didn't celebrate creativity. It was a community that was steeped in poverty and it celebrated materialism. I knew that I would be in the literature and the arts. I just never thought that I would be painting.
What is different? What sets you apart differently than any other kid in DC, who gets in trouble, ends up incarcerated, and can't make that leap and come out and make success?
Very rarely do the children from my community where I grew up at have people who do not come from their socioeconomic background to love them, to believe in them, and to invest in them, right? So, and when you don't have that type of investment, the only thing that you can be is what you see going on in your environment. And if your immediate environment in your household is intergenerational poverty and illiteracy, then that's all that you can articulate.
Well, this art is incredible. I'm so thrilled for you and all of your success. Halim, thank you so much for talking with us about it. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Wow, there are a number of different hooks that you can pull from this particular one. It inspired our mic drop today, so I do want to thank you for bringing us this story very much, Adam Longo. One of the things that he said, talking about the community not celebrating intelligence, and what I take from that is that feeling in that community is actually the consequence of being steeped in poverty for as long as many of those people have been steeped in poverty. So it's actually an indictment of the larger society, and that's what we need to contend with as a city and as a area, people like this who have these barriers in their way to reach their true potential.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle, and a lot of that comes out in his art. And frankly, Reese, I wanted to say this. He's one of the most intelligent people I think I've ever had a chance to talk to. Now, purposefully, I really didn't want to dwell on his crime and his time in prison, because even though his art is sort of an emanation of that time, the art is separate. The art is a result of his intellect and intelligence, not necessarily that 22 years that he was behind bars. In talking with him about that, though, he almost had this, what I'm going to call an Andy Dufresne-esque mindset, right? Where prison is going to affect him. but it wasn't going to change him or define him. I asked him, how do you stay positive? You're facing 2 life sentences. There's the possibility you might never get out. He said he never doubted that he'd be able to get out and do great things. He actually compared himself to Steve Young, sitting on the bench for all those years watching Joe Montana win Super Bowl after Super Bowl, just knowing that he was going to get his chance one day. I was interested in asking him, he was very well read the Wall Street Journal in prison every day. I said, despite the fact that you were well read, you probably had your finger on the pulse of society. What surprised you when you got out? And he said, what surprised me, he was confounded by the fact that so many people were just depressed and miserable. We see people walking around who were just sort of loathing in themselves and what's happening. And he said that was something that really affected him. But the real big takeaway here that I want parents to know, that I want everyone to know, a kid in his shoes facing similar situations, the importance of role models. He looked at somebody like Basquiat and said, that's a guy that looked like me. If he can do it, I know that I can do it.
That's very well said. I love the idea that he looks at his work as books, saying that pictures are worth 1,000 words. Another important takeaway, there is life after the bench.
Yeah.
I can identify with that.
And I know you're going to be talking more about him later in the show, but listen, if you've got a tip for us, that you'd like us to cover a certain story, reach out to me on social media. You can also email me with a tip, alongo@wsa9.com. Reese?